I think this is my 84th video since May. Unbelievable. You know, during a season where it feels as though time is being compacted sort of slowly, like trying to make a snowball out of something that is not good packing snow. I remember when I was a kid and a teenager and stuff, some days it would snow and either I would hear someone say, you know, as a snowball flew past someone's head, hey, this is good packing snow. But those of us that have done any skiing in our life, which I did for, I don't know, 5 years, I guess, 5 years, up through college, and that was it. There's powdery snow that's very dry, and it doesn't, I think the word I'd like to use is adheres easily to other snow. It kind of wants to stay separate and come apart. It wants to crumble rather than become a denser solid, as though it had a choice. And that's how time feels. And anyone that's thought they had a snowball until they tried to throw it and it literally disintegrated in their hand, that's the kind of powdery snow that I think space-time kind of is. You know, it can be affected, it can be, you know, the potter can turn it into a cup or a vase, right? Because it's malleable. But all of these components have a nature of their own, and you know, opportunities to change the state they're in. And I know I'm talking in this really strange place that's sort of somewhere in between you know, Bonhoeffer and Vonnegut. But that is my nature. To kind of stand on just inside of the human side of the Venn diagram, where they intersect and the body, mind, and spirit are all one thing. I tend to kind of spend a lot of my time in the mind and spirit densities of that shared place in the Venn diagram. Okay? And that's why there are these, Frank Zappa used to call them conceptual continuities, you know, that would go across years in many albums for people that were paying attention. That's how these things happen. Some people think like this. And if you've watched 2 of my videos, you know I take notes and then I just sort of riff on the notes and find the graphics later when I get in the editing process after I've got my audio or my live video happening here, you know. And having started this off with talking about almost painfully bright sunlight, the warmest part of the day, the place I like to spend my day is on the front porch next to my wife Tina in a different chair. But there are times of day that it's just not a good place to be. If there's a storm or it's hot, it's just not habitable at those times, and we're getting into the convection oven portion of the afternoon. So here I am talking to you, like I do, and oh yeah, I need to address something. So, Brett, your videos are kind of long. Yes, they are, right? And to kind of paraphrase Gandalf, all right, the content creator finishes their videos precisely when they intend to. Okay? And I know that we live in an age of very, very difficult sustained attention span. Yeah, you know, becoming a practice in a person's life rather than just speeding everything up. I like things to be slow enough that they can be observed. You know, I like to get right to the Schrodinger's cat place with just about everything. And so when I speak, I kind of provide a context, and I try to be exactly who I am for a moment, which is verbose, and yet maybe just share a little bit of my day. And I mean, I don't know where I got this from. It might have been Fred Rogers, all right? It might have been Captain Kangaroo. And, but the whole, hey, how you doing part, and here's how things have been for me until we just bumped into each other factor, that's how it goes. And I was like that as a teacher. How's everybody doing? You know, we'd have a little bit of that at the beginning of classes and stuff. You know, when we could. So, you know, oh, here's another one. Geez, Brett, why are you so caught up in all this, you know, messing with the lodge? Those people do some good. And I don't mess with anybody who's about the good things they're doing. Never. I don't. And I'm discerning enough to know the difference between a service rendered and an act of God. Okay? And truly, I'm going to stand on the side of the people who do acts of good, you know, through whom the Holy Spirit is working. People who consistently are like one-person orchards of fruit of the Holy Spirit. How do they do all that? Well, I know how they do all that, and maybe a lot of you do too. Okay? They're indwelt and fortified and given great direction, and they act decisively and with some boldness, and I like people like that. And if you're acting decisively and with boldness, except you're on the other end of the spectrum, and you spend a whole mess of your time trying to polish that turd by hanging around in a church, I'm going to try to help you get over onto our side of salvation, whether you like it or not. And plus, I didn't choose you to watch this. Stop now. You know, if it's like, man, everything this dude says makes me mad, you probably have something to talk to your, whoever your Lord is. Take it up with the great architect, okay? Because I'm not being mean. And one of the things that is an even more fundamental and foundational through line in whatever this sort of ongoing life seems to be asked to talk about is evil as a real thing. Certainly individuals have to be held accountable for the choices they make, and they're certainly going to let you know when you should be applauding, but a lot of people like me grew up taught that, you know, there's just some things that are better left unsaid, even if it would save someone's life. I mean that literally. No one ever said even if it saves someone's life, but I've seen the consequences of silence, right? The sin of omission and commission of evil deeds at the same time, right? You know, not helping is a sin of omission when someone's drowning. And that is common practice in the United States of America and the Western world in general when it comes to souls plus commerce, right? And it's very viral. I mean, you know, it's all the holy books say that one of the great outcomes of belief is that you'll be experiencing joy, but because of the impatience of the human animal, people basically figure, I kind of want to skip over this belief and these hard parts here that would make me do things differently and just do the things that bring me joy starting now. And then they have to figure out a way to obtain that supply, and that can lead you in a lot of really funky places. Okay? Supply and demand. You know, the serpent basically threw Eve a sales pitch and she got conned. And the outcome of that conversation produces the first murderer, right? The first person who ever suggested that densities of people in one place was a really safe and good idea, the inventor of cities and urban life. And because of that, I believe that Cain, right, the first child of Adam and Eve, also can be credited with the marketplace, whatever that word means to you. The city that Cain went off and created and got a lot of people to come live at, which he made a name for himself sort of by naming it after offspring of his, Enoch. There'd have to be a market, right? Because now people are no longer agrarian and hunting and finding stuff, right? The gatherers are getting the fruit and the grain. The hunters are out there chasing down meat. And then there's another class of person that basically tends to the conditions and the tools and the implements and the training that those skills require. Well, it changes when people move to a city, because you can't grow stuff where there are buildings now. And you certainly can't, in the space that a city occupies, within its city limits, you certainly cannot grow enough food and catch enough animals to feed the people in that city. So you understand, the whole dynamic is different in those locations. Multitudes of people in one place with multitudes of needs at the same time, who are not spared from additional anxiety by being not close to other people. You know? I can't think of too many songwriters that didn't sing a song about getting out of the city somehow. Alrighty, so our serpent there, old Lucifer, he's already in the bloodline, because the consequences of that conversation was the first problem person with issues, a person with a few places in their DNA that were different from Adam, the man who would raise this child. And he was capable of pride and jealousy, just like his real daddy, which is why he took out the second child. Without going into any identifying details, I will say that, having been a teacher, I am aware of true stories, right, told by the parents themselves, of one of their children at some point trying to suffocate, drown, or lead into the wilderness the next child. Like, it's a flaw that can happen in the eldest child if they somehow aren't taught to love other people and to be kind to babies and stuff like that. And I suppose that even if you do teach a kid that and feel as though you've done it to the best of your ability, that there will be the rebel who's like, no, Nope, I want all the cookies. Anyway, so there's the model, right? Bring a bunch of people together that want all the cookies. Each of them wants all the cookies, and change up how they obtain their resources and see what happens, right? That's your first city, Enoch. And many cities followed. And you travel on down the Enoch line a little ways, and along comes Lamech, right? I don't know if Lamech is in the Mormon faith, but if he isn't, he really should be in whatever their analog to Genesis is, because Lamech invented polygamy, right? Not Joseph Smith, not Brigham Young. None of those guys invented polygamy. It's an old thing to have some on the side, for those of you that were ever cheating, all right? And that can lead to corruptions of bloodlines, okay? Because there's a way to be married, and there's a way not to be married, and there's a way to produce kids, and there's a way not to produce kids. And there's a time for wanting to produce kids, and there's a time for be old and stop it, okay? All that. And when you start fooling around with blood, there are genetic consequences, right? So this dummy Lamech, famous for yelling at two women saying, "Hear me, O wives of Lamech," and he brags about killing two people, right? Well, one of them was Cain by accident. It's a really cool story. I'll let you look that up for yourself because it's really fun, right? But Lamech was definitely one of these early Gibberine, okay? The tainted blood of Cain. Cain's offspring are basically marrying one another off in this city of Enoch. So there's all kinds of increased bad blood content because of the limited gene pool. And by the time you get to Lamech, one wife isn't enough. Look, I've been married twice, and one wife is enough, okay? For sure, all right? Out of that union, okay, now, of Lamech and a woman that he was probably cousins to in some way, first, second, third cousins to. They have 3 kids. Denema, a daughter, Tubal Cain, Jubal, and Jabal, right? And in this marketplace that Cain began, okay, back in that city of Enoch, and now people know how to do cities, okay? They know how to do that. They know how to live in one place and fortify it and engage in trade and do the things that people need to do. Well, you know, Lamech is royalty because the direct bloodline of Cain is all of this society. So Lamech, he's a mighty dude. He's a king. His wife's a mighty queen. His wives. And his kids are princes and a princess. Each of whom decides to go get an MBA. And what comes of those, you know, that gilded upbringing is that one of them invents the meat industry. So much for hunting. One of them goes, uh-oh, look, people aren't hunting anymore. I know something they can do with all that free time. And this guy invents musical instruments and song, popular music, right? Plus, over here, we've got another brother. So we've all heard about Jabal, the beef guy, Jubal, who makes you jubilant with music. And now we have Tubal Cain, hyphenated with Grandpa's name there, Cain, and he invents the things you can do when you feel like being idle and frankly just having fun with all that free time, because you're not gathering either, and you're not really having to grow anything for yourself. And that's great, because men and women love music, and they love to play golf, and they love to woodwork and make stuff, and they like sports, and Tubal-Cain observed that people like getting in fights, and so he thought, wow. And plus they occasionally have to deal with besiegements and stuff, and they're throwing rocks at people and spears and arrows and stuff. He comes up with the Bronze Age, essentially, and creates a type of weapon, sword, spear tips, etc., that are way better than flint and crappy iron, okay, and more lightweight too, which I think gave them greater trajectories. And so he's a crafty fellow there, Tubal-Cain. Two balls and a cane. There's not really a sigil, like I would call it, but there's a graphic of this Tubal-Cain's logo, as it were, and the Facebook logo. It looks like an F, kind of like the Facebook logo. It's interesting, these things across history that an art teacher might see. And then the daughter Naamah is essentially invented. She monetized sex. They call it the oldest profession in the world, right? You know, giving something to get something. You know, and you know, back in those days, women didn't have the vote, and you could just about imagine. And it was probably okay to smack the heck out of them if it felt like it, because these are in the days before Noah, when everybody's doing whatever the hell they please. And Naamah said, hell, I know a few really good-looking girls that are poor and hungry as hell. I think I can help them out. And she became the first madam. And I think whenever there was any kind of kinky stuff that they needed a woman to try out, Naamah raised her hand and said, let me try that. I might be able to monetize it. And so this is a very interesting family, okay? And all kinds of nasty gibberim are the result of this widespread woo-woo that's going on. Eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. You know, you hire the wedding band to come on over and make a bunch of music during that whole 7-day long period of getting hammered and going out and rolling around in the bushes with somebody you probably ought not. And not too long after Lamech, you don't have to go too many generations before, on the cleaner side of the family of Adam and Eve, Seth's offspring eventually get us on down to Methuselah, and his grandson is Noah. And you know the story of the flood. It's global. Every culture remembers it in some way, right? Myths could be analyzed in the way that ancestries can be analyzed, right? By looking at the shared DNA of the thing. And there was a flood, and the consequences are all around us still. Yep. So after the flood, let's clear up a few things here. I think that a lot of people are converging on the very same best answer for how were there giants after the flood? It doesn't make any sense, right? Because Noah was perfect in his generations. He would have been raised by people that were, you know, what we now call Abrahamic, right? After the flood, the kind of very close relationship with the one God was, you know, that's how Adam raised Seth to be, with various degrees of success through that bloodline. And that bloodline leads to Noah, who's got these 3 sons, okay? And they're all married, and, you know, they observe their father making this boat, and they participate in it, and they know the whole thing, right? And why, what for, and what's coming. And there are people that are looking at extra-biblical histories. Okay, you can go back and find all kinds of things, Babylonian, Sumerian, Phoenician, Greek, Mede, later historians, like, the guys that were writing about the crucifixion, Josephus and those folks, and on and on and on. There are people that can translate and not be a dummy about it, or push it anywhere it doesn't want to go. And you can draw these perfect verifications and clarifications of things that are in the Bible, and I might say expositions in some case. And people are beginning to believe that in His mercy, God did not prohibit Ham's wife from entering the ark. In His mercy, because she'd become pregnant as a result of an assault, and Ham had nothing to do with his wife getting assaulted. Okay, we're living in a time of just widespread merriment, okay, and craziness and perviness and Sodom and Gomorrah stuff, exponentially worse, because there's giant monstrous things involved in doing these things. It's just beyond imagination. Something happened to Ham's wife. None of the children of Noah's wives are named. But when she's on that ship, she's pregnant with a completely unplanned for, unwanted, and heartbreaking pregnancy. She's bearing something that isn't perfect in its generations. And I don't know how Noah and his wife felt about it. I'm real sure I know how Ham felt about it. I hope he was cool. I hope the brothers and their wives were helpful getting her through all that mess. And remember that this child isn't cursed until Ham shows his ass, and evil is found within him, okay? And there are some stories about that. I believe that the more pelvically oriented minds like to cleave to the whole, when he uncovered Noah, he did this, that, or the other thing to Noah or his wife while they were drunk. It's like, no, stop it. No. That's not why Noah cursed Canaan, because of any kind of SA thing. No, stop it. Stop projecting, some of you, please. All right? No, it was a grave thing just to simply take the covering off of the father, because number one, it was a supremely rude ass thing to do that none of us would do. Okay? We wouldn't if we're raised right. You just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it if you were drunk. You wouldn't do it if you were drunk. And Ham probably was drunk. Okay? I think he just basically thought that he was doing something funny on one hand. Ha ha ha. First grape harvest. Woo woo. Guess what I did? Dumbass things. Okay? But I think that also he'd been around long enough to have talked to a whole mess of people, okay, that were brilliant. He would have known Enoch, all right? He would. And Methuselah and all these other people that just had incredible minds and had lived a long time. He knew a lot about stuff on this planet and creation that we can only guess at. And he also knew that Adam, remember, when he and Eve realized that they were naked and it made them ashamed, God provided them with a garment, each of them. And that was the first time that God took the life of something himself in creation. Something was sacrificed. We don't know what kind of animal it was. I'm sure it might have been very large, because this would have been back in the days of your giant sloths and mammoths and so forth, okay? Those suckers, or some earlier version of them, were certainly roaming around, right? Because elephants got onto the ark, and so did sloths. But things were bigger back then. Now, Canaan got cursed because, number one, he did a really gravely rude thing to his dad, but I think of that as forgivable. If my kid was drunk and did a dumbass thing like that, even if it was like super embarrassing on some level that I can't imagine, I'd get over it. Now, Ham wanted that garment. He wanted to look at it. He wanted to read it and study it. Okay? That garment, it still exists somewhere today. And it is so full of truth and wisdom and the fundamentals of science and proofs of things that are only touched with a drinking straw in the Bible once or twice or three times. Ham wanted to see it. He wanted to know some of that stuff that down through the generations, every possessor of that garment since Adam was told, don't misuse it, don't show it to anybody. It's a national security issue, literally, in that age. For whatever reason, Ham felt he needed more than God to have a leg up after the flood, and he either took the garment or he remembered some of it. And before you know it, we've got weapons again. We've got prostitution again. We've got all kinds of musical celebrations around polytheistic commercial products of the day. And people are eating whatever they wish. It makes me think of that King Crimson album named after a delicacy, right? From some period during the old wig-wearing kings of England days, when it was so delicious to have lark's tongues in aspic. I don't like aspic. It's a horrible gelatinous thing. Instant gag reflex right there. But when I have to think about what it would take to get the tongues out of a songbird, like a lark, in enough of a quantity, seeing as each bird only has one, to produce a dish that somebody would want to eat, unbelievable. It's pre-flood menu stuff. And before you know it, you got Nimrod, who voluntarily engaged in some sort of genetic manipulation of his body in order to become the kind of gibberine, okay, a mighty man, a man of renown, a pre-flood demigod kind of dude. And from Nimrod, all of a sudden, off we go with this dark church that exists today, right? This really unholy dance with the evil dead for gain, power, profit, and fun, which involves lying, ruining and or killing people, looting and robbery, codes of secrecy about the people within the congregation you're a part of regarding their evil deeds, and there is no sanctity in marriage insofar as it limiting what you might like to do with your body parts with whomever you wish, whenever you wish. And some people are thinking of Hollywood. And some people are thinking of Mar-a-Lago. And some people are thinking of Lolita Island. And some people are thinking of Prince Andrew. And some people are thinking of the bizarre footage from a particular maximum security facility in which someone managed to create about a 50-foot long rope of torn bed sheets without anybody hearing sheets being torn, and then take themselves out on a night when cameras just happen to be not working like they normally do. And there's the through line. Okay? Just walk backwards in your brain to the beginning of the video where someone says, hey, I got something you ain't got. I have the knowledge of good and evil. You want some? Just take a hit. Just take a sip. Just rub a little on your gums. How's that feel?
Arthur, King of the Britons, your knights of the Round Table shall have a task to make them an example in these dark times.
Good idea, O Lord.
Of course it's a good idea!